Here we go. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. We're going to keep this right on track. So I need your attention. My name's Tony Mendez. I'm the Senior VP of Programming for USASBE, and I'm here to kick off this morning's session. You know, with all the champagne that was flowing last night, I'm surprised to see this great crowd here this morning. Real troopers. Well, they told me to keep it brief, so I'm going to make it real simple and to introduce our president of USASBE, Rebecca White, who will take us through today's program. Rebecca?
Good morning, everyone. I had the opportunity to meet a lot of you last night. For those of you who are just arriving this morning, I want to give you a hearty welcome. I know we're going to all enjoy this conference. We've got some exciting papers, some wonderful exhibitors out there, some wonderful local entrepreneurs who are out there. So I encourage all of you to meet colleagues, have a wonderful time, learn best practices, and meet some of the wonderful sponsors that are supporting our program. Last night was a wonderful event. There was a little champagne consumed, and I think today is going to be an exciting one as well, with lots of interesting and fun activities. We're going to start this morning with a couple of awards. I'd like to, first of all, welcome Mark Schinkel to the stage. Mark, are you with us this morning? Thank you. Mark is an associate professor at Belmont University, and he is representing Dean Pat Raines this morning. Dean Raines from Belmont could not be with us, but we are honoring Belmont this morning because a few years ago, USASBE was in a position to move our central headquarters, and Belmont graciously stepped up, did a wonderful job. They've been our home for the last three and a half years, I believe, and they've done a fabulous job, and we are very much in appreciation for their support, everything they've done for us. Because of Belmont, we had a great home and a great executive director in Becky Gann over these last few years. So if you would, please help me thank Belmont University. I'd like to now invite Marlene Reed from Baylor University to the podium to present the Baylor USASBE Student Case Writing Competition Award.
Good morning. First of all, I want to introduce our judges. We had 3 judges who did a magnificent job in evaluating the student cases that were presented yesterday. First of all, Dr. Kay Keels from Coastal Carolina University, Dr. Armand Galinsky from Sonoma State University, Dr. Dean Kutramanis from University of Tampa. And now I'd like to introduce the 6 finalists, and I'll also introduce the 3 winners of our competition. The first place receives $2,000, second place is $1,000, and third place is $500. First of all, one of our finalists was Nitin Kumar Jain. His case was entitled After 12, and he's from IMT Hyderabad, India, and unfortunately at the last minute he couldn't be with us, but we'll send his certificate along to him. Another one of our participants was Meg Losner from Samford University. The name of her case was Southern Grits to Haute Cuisine, Much More Than a Taste of the South. I believe she's not here, but her professor, Franz Lorke, is going to receive this for her. Thank you, Franz. Another one of our finalists is Jacob Murray from Baylor University, and his case was entitled Bambino Super City. Jacob? And now to our winners. Our second runner-up, receiving a $500 prize, was a case entitled Rafa Yoga. The professor for this group was Dr. Elaine Notarantonio. The group would come forward, if you would, and receive your certificates. We have 3 of them. 2 of them. From Bryant University, Gina Albury, Jessica Helfrich, and Megan Lemoy. Thank you. Our first runner-up, winning $1,000, is a case entitled Charlie Thigpen's Garden Gallery. And this team is from Samford University. Their professor, Franz Lorke, and they're coming forward. I'm going to call their names. Unfortunately, one of our students is the quarterback of the football team, and he was injured. In fact, he has a vertical tear in his tendon, and so he's hobbling around this morning. But the participants from Samford for this case were Laura Hudson, Joshua Shepard, Andrew Summerlin, and finally Ellie Chin, who could not be with us. She's gone back to China, I believe. Thank you so much. And our winning team, our number 1 team that receives $2,000 prize, had a case entitled Growing Pains at Diaper Dude. And it was just as interesting as the name implies. And this team is from Marymount Loyola, and the members are Anise Bashara, Hector Gonzalez, Gobind Manwani, and Andrew Veronikar. And we have one of their students receiving these for the group this morning.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Marlene, and thank you, Baylor. That's a wonderful program. We're all very proud of our students, and this is a great way to get them involved in the things that we do and honor their work. I'd now like to invite the current ICSB president. He's professor of entrepreneurship and academic director of the Institute of Minority Entrepreneurship at the Dublin Institute of Technology. And he's also chair of the 2014 World Conference, which will be in Dublin. And I hear actually the first night is at Guinness, so I know this crowd might enjoy that. Please help me welcome Tom Cooney to the stage for a couple of moments to tell you about ICSB.
Díaz Smith Accorda. I'm presuming that not everyone here speaks fluent Irish, so I've just welcomed you in my native language. I'd like to offer my sincerest thanks to Rebecca and to USASBE for the invitation to be here and just to say a few words. The relationship between USASBE and ICSB has been a very strong and collaborative one over many, many years now. And the invitation to be here, and we had our board meeting here yesterday, and I think it's helped to build stronger and stronger relationships, which I think is really good for all of us. I just want to do a quick show of hands. How many people here in the room are members of ICSB? Okay. The answer is you are all members of ICSB. And because you join USASBE through the conference, you automatically become a member of ICSB. It's the same with the European Conference and the same with many of the other conferences across the world. So when you join USASBE, not only do you get the benefits of what that organization gets, but in addition to that, and for no additional fee, you also become a member of ICSB and get the benefits of that organization. And currently, we are working really hard to try and provide you with additional benefits to that which your affiliates already provide. So, for example, you get the Journal of Small Business Management as a member of ICSB. You get access to a range of webinars for free as a member of ICSB, in addition to the ones that are provided by USASBE. So, for example, if the European Council for Small Business is running a webinar, you are entitled to join us for that webinar for free. So within the website, there's a calendar of activities that I would suggest that you might look at and see what's available on a regular basis and see what you might tap into and avail of for free. This is getting better, isn't it? 8 o'clock in the morning, you're getting all these things for free. And so, also within there, you'll see a page on the benefits of membership. You might take a look at that, because within that, you've also got access to publications where you get things like 35% off. Edward Elgar publications as one example, but Rutledge and others also offer you deals as members of ICSB. So there's a wide range of offers which you may not be aware of, and all you got to do is go to the website and just, I suppose, become more proactive and make yourself more aware of what you can tap into. Very briefly, I just want to just talk about 4 things. In my role as president of the World Body, it's been my pleasure and sometimes my pain to travel great distances. It sounds really exciting to be in Brazil, but when you've done it, when you've been there and back in 4 days and gone into school to teach on Monday morning, it's not as exciting. But over the last 6 months, I've been to New Zealand, I've been to Brazil, I've been to Korea, China, I'm here now, I've been a number of places in Europe. And what I find really interesting is that wherever I travel, 4 questions keep coming up in every location. And they are, what are the benefits of entrepreneurship? Okay, now we know, okay, and particularly in a culture such as America, you're more aware of this than other affiliates where I talk, but we know the economic benefits. And increasingly we talk about the social benefits. But I think the one we might need to work on more strongly are the personal benefits, the personal development of the students. This is something I talk about with my own students, where about taking entrepreneurship is not about ensuring you start the business, but about you being a more entrepreneurial person and how you can bring that into your life in whatever career you choose to take. And the benefit, one of the things I love about entrepreneurship is that it doesn't matter whether you're academically gifted or not. You don't have to be a grade A student to do really well in entrepreneurship. Actually, being a grade A student might be the opposite to what we're looking for. And the other thing I said to my students is that I'm very lucky. I'm in a wonderful career. I absolutely love driving to work in the morning because I work with 2 of the most interesting groups of people in the world. I work with young people and I work with entrepreneurs. 2 highly exciting, 2 highly energetic groups of people. And as you also know, 2 highly frustrating groups of people. But that's what makes it so enjoyable. The second question I get asked is, how do we teach entrepreneurship? Okay, and one of the things I noticed about the conference is so many workshops and so much attention being paid towards the notion of how can we make this better? How can we make it more exciting? How can we get our students more engaged? Because certainly the notion of standing in front of a group of students for 2 hours and lecturing to them is gone. We've got to move away from that model to something that's much more about experiential learning and transformative learning. And how do we build in social media and technology to enhance that experience? And that's something that wherever I go in the world, we're all searching for that kind of learning and kind of improvement. Which brings me on to the next question, which, what is good practice? People say, Tom, you travel all over, okay? Where's good examples? Can I tell you something really interesting, right? One of the best conferences I've been at in a very long time was in Brussels in November. It was hosted by the European Foundation for Training, or the European Training Foundation, sorry, and it had 38 countries from developing and transition economies. And it was about entrepreneurship education. And they were there talking about entrepreneurship. Okay, and what can we do? But you know what was really interesting? They had none of the preconceived ideas that we have when we go to a conference. In many ways, some of our conferences, okay, and I'm not talking about the organization of it, I'm talking about the content, sometimes it's getting tired, sometimes it's getting old. And you go to amongst this group of people who are kind of saying, with a fresh page are saying, okay, let's kind of reimagine all of this. We don't have any baggage to bring with us. We're starting from scratch. And what they're not looking at good practice, what they're looking for is next practice. And that's the challenge I would throw to you during the course of this conference. What is next practice? Where are we going to from here? The final question is, who can help? Who can help us in all this? Very recently at a conference in Dublin, I had a very public disagreement with a hugely successful entrepreneur. It wasn't a really clever thing to do on my part. But basically, he was dissing, entrepreneurship educators. He was saying that we were of no use, no benefit. Actually, people who are interested in entrepreneurship shouldn't even go to college. He sold his company for 130 million a couple of years previously, and I was in kind of a tough place. But at the same time, I said, hang on a sec. Okay, I think we can do a lot. Because we're all part of an ecosystem, and we all have a contribution to make. And I know what I'm good at, and I know what my strengths. I'm not going to be an entrepreneur and sell a company 130 million, but I'm really good at teaching and working with young students. That's my skill. And I value that, and other people value that. So we're all part of an ecosystem that can make a contribution. And I think those are the 4 questions that keep repeating themselves, and I think some of the ideas that you will be challenged with over the coming 3 days. Finally, I'd just like to say, as Rebecca said, that next year in the ICSB World Conference is going to be in Dublin. And yes, Rebecca's quite right. The openings reception is in Guinness Brewery. Ooh, that's going to be a tough one. But this year, our World Conference is in Puerto Rico. And I think if we're looking for a place to balance work with life, that get balanced, I think that might be a really good location to go to as well. So I hope many of you will make it to our World Conference in Puerto Rico. It's on in June. The details are outside. And again, I wish you very well with your conference. I wish you great debate. And I'd like to thank Rebecca and USASBE once again for the very warm welcome that we've received here this week. Thank you very much, folks. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Tom's doing a great job as the president, and I do encourage all of you to check out the booth and to be more involved in ICSB. We have a wonderful speaker this morning, so I'd like to move on with the program. As I mentioned earlier, a big part of the success of this program and why we're able to have the amenities that we have for you is because of our sponsors. So one of our sponsors is Sage One. They're the sponsor of this session. It's a simple web application for managing a small business. It connects the essential tools entrepreneurs need in one place to save time and simplify business life. I'd like to now invite the Director of Channel Development for Sage One, Louis Keelis, to the stage to introduce our speaker. Louis?
Thank you, Rebecca. Good morning, everybody, and welcome. Our first speaker this morning has experience as a business executive in Europe, North America, and Asia with Fortune 100 companies, as well as privately funded and venture-backed companies, and most recently was president and CEO of the Silicon Valley Association of Startup Entrepreneurs. He co-founded 8 companies, including the Access Group companies and Digitalent, with 6 achieving profitable liquidity events. He has been an invited speaker at Babson College, the National Institution of Technology, and the Oxford University Business School, and at startups and venture capital conferences in cities around the world. He is a member of the Sand Hills Angels and a board member of the Mission College Center for Innovation and Technology. He's been featured in written articles on business and technology issues for the Financial Times, the Business Week, and other publications, and also hosts the television show The Silicon Valley Entrepreneur. Please join me in welcoming the CEO of Silicon Valley Forum, Chris Gill.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Good morning, and thank you very much for inviting me to come and share my experiences with you, which I hope you will find interesting, informative, and hopefully entertaining at the same time. It's helpful for me, because you now know a little bit about me, for me to understand a little bit about you, to help me do my job well. And so just help me a little bit with this, if you can. Who had a good time last night? Okay, lots of people. Okay, good. I know you all teach entrepreneurship. How many of you have actually founded or co-founded a startup? Oh, geez, very high number. And how many have raised venture capital in the past? Again, a similarly good number. Okay. So you obviously know a lot more about entrepreneurship than I do, so this is going to be a really tough job. So I think I better take my jacket off. Welcome to Silicon Valley in the San Francisco Bay Area, which, as you know, has got a plethora of companies, existing companies. We have thousands of those, all the well-known names that you know about. In addition to that, in the valley itself, we have between 3,500 and 4,000 startups, and in San Francisco, a further 2,500 and 3,000 startups. So this is a hotbed of entrepreneurship, and I'm delighted to be involved in it. So let me give you a little bit of additional background as to why I've been asked to come and talk with you. And the benefits is that I do run this organization, SV Forum, that's been going since 1983. I was asked if I'd become the CEO about a year ago. And we engage with around about 20,000 of the most productive and creative designers, technologists, and entrepreneurs on a regular basis. We do that through around about 200 events per year, so an event per working day. And as one measure of the impact that we have, our members have raised over $200 million in the past 5 years. That's not big in the scale of Facebook, but in the scale of companies that are raising a few $100,000 at a time, this is a lot of companies. I have the great good fortune to have on my board senior executives from IBM, Microsoft, Nokia, and Qualcomm, and also partners from Hummel Windblad and NEA. We also have additional sponsors who are from the corporate world and the venture world. As was mentioned before, I'm a board member of the Mission College Center for Innovation and Technology. Babson College has recently asked me to become an entrepreneur in residence there. And I've been a member of Sand Hill Angels for the past 8 years. So I get the opportunity to see a lot of different things about entrepreneurship and get inputs and insights from different perspectives, which has helped shape the way I think about things. So what I'd like to do is share with you my understanding of what goes on and why things work here. It's not the definitive version, it's my version, and there will be others. So my take on what makes Silicon Valley special, I think we have to go back around about 50 or 60 years. And we do that to a guy called William Shockley. Who's heard of William Shockley? Oh, quite a few, terrific, okay. So he was the guy who invented the transistor. And it took him and his team a lot of time. This was years of work. Many things went wrong along the way. They had to try many, many different things. But eventually, he and his team achieved success. And this was back in the 60s. And the downside to that was that he and his team did not get on very well. And he'd attracted some of the best minds, the best talent in the world to come and work for him. And one of the key reasons was that when they actually got something that worked, his team wanted to go and do something with it. They were more entrepreneurial. And so for them, taking this to making it a product, taking it out to market, actually selling it, being able to raise an invoice, that was fun to them. He didn't want to do that. He wanted to stay back prior to that. He wanted to do more research, try new ideas, try different things, which for them was just not fun. And so a group of them, led by a couple of guys called Gordon Moore and Bob Noyce, called the Traitorous Eight. Anybody heard, who's heard of the Traitorous Eight? Yeah, quite a number of people again. They got together with a company called Fairchild Camera and Instrument, because cameras and instruments were necessary for making semiconductors at that time, and formed a company called Fairchild Semiconductor. And after many years of trials and tribulations, Fairchild Semiconductor produced some of the first functioning production transistors and some of the first integrated circuits. 4 transistors on a chip, the first integrated circuit. 4 transistors. This was big stuff. But then they had what I would classify for the founders or the owner of Fairchild Camera and Instrument an epic fail. Because the guy who was running Fairchild Camera and Instrument, things weren't going quite so well there, so he began diverting money from Fairchild Semiconductor to Fairchild Camera and Instrument Company. And so that made it very, very difficult for the people in Fairchild Semiconductor to recruit and pay talent to get the equipment they need and so on and so forth. So eventually, Gordon Moore and Bob Noyce said, screw this. And they went off and founded a company called Intel. So before today, how many people had heard of Fairchild Camera and Instrument? Oh, more people than I thought. Okay, but it's not one of those names that you ring with. How many people have heard of Intel? Okay, there you go. That's why it was an epic fail. So they went off and did Intel and really began to work on the integrated circuit, did static RAMs, dynamic RAMs, flash memory, microprocessors. And the breakup of Fairchild Semiconductors also spawned companies including AMD, National Semiconductor, Intersil, Union Carbide, and a whole lot more also spun out from Intel too. There was Zilog and huge numbers more. There were companies associated with providing the equipment to them, the talent to them. And so this whole semiconductor industry, which is why it's called Silicon Valley, blossomed hugely in a relatively short space of time. All because some of these people didn't do the right things at the right times. And that, to me, was a great part of establishing the Silicon Valley culture. There was, through the developing semiconductor process, a clear understanding that things very rarely work first time. In the semiconductor industry at that time, it was unknown for anything to work the first time. So the idea of try again until you got it right was very well ingrained in the system. Finding out what doesn't work was part of the process, and the idea was to find out what doesn't work as quickly and as cheaply as possible. The team was key. When the team left Shockley just drifted off into nothing. When the team left Fairchild, it drifted off into nothing. So, very, very clear, the team is more important than the knowledge and the patents. Much, much more important. We'll touch on that over again later on. And if you don't like it, go and do it for yourself. Which is very different from, let's say, where I started over in Europe. You've probably guessed I'm not from around here. I'm originally from London. And was brought over here about 20 years ago when I sold a group of European companies to a big American corporation. And when I did my first startup back in 1975, I got the inputs of, who do you think you are? What makes you think you can do this? Why don't you go and get yourself a real job? So it's very, very different from what you could do here. Whereas here, if I'd been doing it here, they say, yeah, good on you, go out and do it. It also spawned Silicon Valley venture capital. Now, Silicon Valley didn't invent venture capital. Venture capital was created after the Second World War by a guy called General Dorio. But they did bring venture capital to Silicon Valley. One of the keys to that was a guy called Arthur Rock, who was originally an East Coast investment banker. He worked with the team that came out of Shockley and with Fairchild Camera Instrument to help them found Fairchild Semiconductor. Subsequently funded Intel and Apple Computer. And then Don Valentine, who was sales at National Semiconductor, which had spun out of Fairchild. Intel were going digital, National Semiconductor was going analog. Founded National and subsequently founded Sequoia Venture Capital, one of the most successful venture capital firms in the world. And what they had at that time was there was a high demand for whatever they could build. The stuff they were trying to do was really, really difficult. If they could do it, there was a huge market waiting for them. It was very, very difficult technology. It took years to get some of this going. Even the people doing it didn't understand sometimes how it worked. And there were very, very few capable teams in the whole world. Not just in Silicon Valley, in the whole world capable of doing this. So what these people were doing were taking a very long view. They understood the industry very well. They'd either been involved in it very, very early on, or they'd been a player in it. They knew there was a high demand for products out there, and all they had to do was make the technology work. If they could do that, everything would be good. And it was a long view. They knew it would take years. And along the way, over this 50, 60 years, it's given the opportunity to develop an experienced infrastructure. So you have attorneys. Right now in Silicon Valley, there's something over 1,000 startups are getting angel funded in the last 12 months, and about 300 have received an A round of funding. Angel funding is going up, A round funding is going down, but nevertheless, that's 1,300 funding transactions just in this area. And so the attorneys here get really good at understanding how to deal with these. The money, the venture capital, the angels, the VCs, because there's so many transactions, they get very experienced in understanding how this stuff works. It's a volume deal. We have the great good fortune to have spawned some very successful companies who also provide the opportunities for exits that are not available elsewhere. So as an example, a company like Google will be buying a startup per week, 50 per year. Cisco, PayPal, eBay, others are also acquiring companies at a relatively similar rate. So there's a great opportunity to start a company, be reasonably successful, get something going, get acquired very quickly in a 12 to 18-month period. The average sell, you don't hear about most of these. The average acquisition price is around about $15 million, so it's not huge, doesn't hit the papers. But the volume, again, is very, very high. These companies are also users. So they're also, in this area here, they're also the users of the products and the technologies that are created here. And starting from very, very early on, it developed a culture of mentorship and giving back. People in Silicon Valley are very willing to share what they've learned. It's something that pretty much every startup founder, every successful startup founder is willing to share their experiences with. And of course, the ones that have been successful, the ones who've been early employees at companies like PayPal and Facebook and Google, they're becoming millionaires, multi-millionaires, and they're also giving back by funding, by being angel investors to a lot of the startups in the area. It's also over that period of time, the process of doing a startup has become fairly well understood. This is a chart that the team at Y Combinator show to all the companies that come into them, that you're going to go through pretty much this process. Pretty much every company goes through it. The downside is that there will be a very high percentage of companies when they get to that red line, the crash of ineptitude, they will not make it through. They will go down and give up. There's a number of theories as to why startups don't work, but one of them, and it's come from a number of sources, is that founders and co-founders give up too early. They get to the crash of ineptitude, and instead of fighting their way through it, it's been a long slog. Things haven't been going as well as they'd anticipated. They thought they'd be making money by this time and everybody would love them, and it's not that way at all, and they've been working 18 hours a day, and they give up. Very frequently, the ones that succeed are the ones that don't give up. So what do we have now? We have this apparent culture of youth, that only young entrepreneurs can get out and do it. They're the only ones with the ideas. And the unfortunate thing about that is, or the fortunate thing about that is, if you actually check the stats on it, the average age of entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley is around about 40. So for everybody who's in their 20s, there's a whole bunch of people in their 50s and 60s. The average is around about 40. The ideal entrepreneur, in my mind, actually, is somebody who's been experienced in an industry for a number of years, has been married, has some kids, and is now divorced, has to work to pay their spouse, finds they're frustrated in the job they used to have, and they think their boss is an idiot, they want to go and do something else. They don't have a social life because they're all bitter and twisted about the divorce, and so they spend all their time, all their energy, all their passion, on developing a new startup, because this is their baby. And these people are about 40. It just happens to work out that way. There is a plethora of technology out there. Technology is no longer hard. Technology is pouring out of all kinds of places. Stanford has 7,000 patents. Google, when they bought Motorola, bought across 3,000 patents. IBM has more patents than it knows what to do with. So on and so on and so on. There's so much technology out there. Somebody a couple of years ago said, I'm not sure we'll ever invent anything new now. Damn it, there's new stuff coming out all the time. So there's more enabling technology available to entrepreneurs now than there's ever been in the history of the world. Huge amounts of it. So the risk now for many entrepreneurs is the reverse of what it was back in the time that Silicon Valley started off. It's not the technology, the risk now is in the market. Do customers actually want what it is that you're trying to build? And this has ended up with Silicon Valley being, on average, something over 40% of the venture capital in the US. Software continues to dominate venture capital and is continuing to grow. And so we have the highest concentration of venture capital in the world in this very small area, representing something like 30% of the world's venture capital just in this very small area. So where's it headed? Well, according to Mark and Andreessen, and I tend to go along with it, software is eating the world. If there's anything that can be organized into an algorithm in any way, it's going to go software. This can be a good thing and a bad thing. It means that, yeah, lots of people who are doing relatively mundane jobs will not have those jobs in the future. They'll have to do something different because software is taking it over. Software is going to do it for you. And it's in pretty much every field. Now you can even buy, there's all kinds of things you can buy. I mean, software's taking it all over. But the sugar high that people have been getting from the low barrier to entry of the consumer internet companies is beginning to slide because they have failed to maintain their high expectations having gone public. And what we're seeing is that the pendulum is beginning to, what it originally moved towards the consumer internet space, is beginning to move away from that. So Bob's trajectory, and who wouldn't want to be massive Bob? Bob's trajectory is moving more towards the enterprise area with industrial automation, big data, the analytics there, and on the health tech and biometric side. So overall, there's phenomenal opportunities out there for entrepreneurs. But what we have learned over this 50 to 60 years, most Silicon Valley startups fail. This is a big surprise to lots of people. Most Silicon Valley startups fail. Most Silicon Valley angels lose money. It's not a way to get rich. It's more of a social function. Because overall, as an industry, angels lose slightly more money than they invest. So it's not a good way to make money. Most Silicon Valley VC firms lose money. Again, this is a surprise, particularly to the limited partners who put the money into them. In that, there used to be in the US around about, at the peak, around about 1,200 venture firms. That's now down to under 500. And I was reading earlier this week that of those 500, only around about 100 are actually active, have invested in the last 12 months. And of those 100, 98% of the profits come from less than 20 companies. So again, most venture capital firms lose money. So a very small number of all of these, the entrepreneurs, the angel investors, the VCs, account for all the positive returns. It is a hits-driven business. A small number of big hits dictates success versus failure. One of the things that we get in the job I have as CEO of SV Forum is the government sends to me about a delegation per week from somewhere in the world. And they want to come to Silicon Valley to learn how to do it. And generally what happens is that there's between 15 and 30 entrepreneurs from that region and a couple of government wranglers keeping an eye on them. And they come in and they say, okay, we've come here to make some orders, make some partnerships and get funded, and we're here for a week, so can we get going, please? It's a great eye-opener to them that a couple of things. One is that nobody cares about them. They might be the best in name your region, but when you've got 20,000 executive summaries floating around Silicon Valley at any one time, you do not care about 30 coming from somewhere else. Particularly 30 coming across an international boundary, which makes it difficult for an investor. How do I invest in them? What vehicle can I use? If they're successful, how do I get my money back? So they're not going to get venture funded in that week while they're here. It's just not going to happen. In fact, it'd be difficult to get anybody to talk to them. The second question is, how do we create Silicon Valley in my region? We've just, new government's just been elected here, so we've got 4 years in which we're going to do it. So we just need to create Silicon Valley, please. Just tell us how we're going to do that. Geez, if I could do that, I wouldn't be standing here doing this. I'd be rolling around, making money on a beach somewhere. So the real answer is no, they can't do it. I mean, it's taken 60 years to get to where we've got to now in Silicon Valley. So the question is asked is, well, what should we do? There's lots of answers to this. Again, I don't have the definitive answer. The next speaker, Steve Blank, may do. He's a lot smarter than me. He sees a lot more than me. He's certainly got some views on this. But my take on this is there's some possibilities. What I see is that entrepreneurship, success entrepreneurship, is a grassroots thing. It comes from the people themselves. Entrepreneurs lead the way. I've had for a long time a friend who runs an organization called the Center for Venture Education that teaches people how to become VCs. They've been operating for about 12 or 13 years now. They've got about 600 people they've done this for worldwide. And he gets asked by countries, come in and help us set up a venture capital infrastructure here because we want to stimulate entrepreneurship in name your region. And his response to them says, that's great. What and who are you going to invest in? Because you don't have any entrepreneurs yet. And yeah, well, you know, if we've got the money, it'll come. Doesn't work that way. It's the other way around. You have to have the entrepreneurs first, and then the money follows. And most other stuff follows, like the service providers too. So what I see makes a difference is when you've got a very vibrant grassroots activity on entrepreneurship. For example, Stanford tries to do entrepreneurship. They're getting their act together pretty well on that. What really ticks them off is when the students say, you know, you guys just haven't got your heads together on this, we're going to go off and do it. And when the students themselves go and do it and form their own clubs, their own incubators, make things happen, do stuff, that to me indicates, hey, that's a vibrant area. So that's a whole different thing. It starts from the bottom up. It's grassroots up. Understand that entrepreneurs are driven. This is sometimes a difficult thing for, again, the governments to get their arms around. That if you've got to sort of drag people into being entrepreneurs, they're not yet ready. Or they may have not had the circumstance that switches them from being an employee to wanting to do their own startup. You know, for example, in my case, my first startup back in 1975, it fell into my lap. I was happily working for a fairly large company, and I was trying to open a bank account somewhere, and the guy said to me, I'm sorry, you're going to have to wait 3 weeks to get your checkbook. This is nuts. Why do I have to wait 3 weeks to get my checkbook? I can take a microprocessor development system, a Centronics printer. I can get the special ink. There's no difficulty with that. And we can print you checks on this. This is easy. Why don't I do that for you? And they said, you can do that? I said, yeah. So they gave me $100,000 to deliver a system to them, which we did. I employed a programmer to do it. We wrote the system. We got it going. We came along. There it is. Boom. There you go. It took us about 3 months. And this was fabulous. And then they said, wow, this works. This is terrific. Can you roll this out to the 250 branches we have throughout the UK? At which point I fell apart because I was an engineer. I'd got no idea how to do any of that. So I sold that company and went back to a big company to learn how to do some stuff and to find team members. But that ruined me for working for a big company again. And what we often see is that people have to have a life experience. They get so frustrated working at the company that's not going to do what they think are the right things. They get fired. Something happens that switches them from being an employee to, you know, I'm going to go and do this. I'm going to go and make it happen. It's very difficult to drag people into it. And one of the reasons for that is, you know, being an entrepreneur is a heck of a lot of effort. It's really, really hard. And there's a huge difference. I know there's some universities a few years ago to stimulate entrepreneurship gave anybody who had an idea $5,000. There you are, you can go and do it. Nothing much happened. Nothing came out of it. The Canadian government, along with other governments, has a program where they give tax incentives and they will pay the cost of development engineers in startup companies. And after about 10 years, while it's a very efficient way for investors, for the companies that do succeed, a very high proportion of those companies have not produced a thing. They're not entrepreneurs, they're R&D shops where people work 9 to 5 because all the costs are covered, they can go in, they can tinker about and they can play, they've never produced a product. So actually, I think the reverse is true. And one of the examples that I really like is a guy called Eric Benamou, who's the chairman of Palm. He started out in North Africa as a street urchin, and his first company was selling spare parts that he stole from motorcycles. And he had developed a catalog and the whole thing, and he learned how to do it, and it was all, you know, he developed his first startup. And he worked his way up from that to being the chairman of Palm. That's a guy who's driven. That's a guy who has to succeed. It's really, really tough to do that. My advice to the Canadian government when they asked me, and they had me go up there for 2 years to talk with them, was stop giving the grants, stop giving the tax relief. If the companies cannot get across the US border and sell some stuff, then you shouldn't be giving them money. Difficult for them to do that, but I think it actually should be made hard for entrepreneurs to succeed. And that's certainly what happens in Silicon Valley. It's tough. You don't get venture capital. Pretty much nobody funds ideas here. You have to show that there's a demand, that the market needs what you want, that you've got something worthwhile before they'll put money into it. So making it harder actually sorts out, the wheat from the chaff. Understand that failure is part of the process, and this is extraordinarily difficult for governments to get their arms around. I don't know how many groups of governments I've met with have said, well, because I've been through the whole failure thing and how it works in Silicon Valley and how 1 in 100 gets funded, and of those 1 in 100 get funded, 1 in 10 will have a really successful exit. So you've got really big numbers. And they've said, our ideas are better. Our entrepreneurs are better. We will be successful. Yeah, this is nuts. Of course your ideas aren't any better. Your ideas, everybody's got the same sort of ideas there. And if you think we've got some of the best talent with the best support system in the world here, and we have those numbers, your numbers are going to be better, that doesn't kind of ring true. Failure is part of the process. And the key of that, which they learned very early on in the semiconductor industry, was to try to get to accept this and find ways to do it quickly and cheaply. And with the cost and the resources required to develop software these days, you can do that really quickly and cheaply. So you should be doing that. You should be going through. And what we've found, and research by people like Wasserman has backed this up, that generally companies have 2 or 3 attempts. People have 2 or 3 attempts at companies before they get it going. They've got to build up some experience. And very frequently those companies have 2 or 3 pivot points to adapt to what is happening in the market. You do less than that, they tend not to be successful. You do more than that, they tend not to be successful. But failure, or learning experiences as we call it here, is part of the process. So given all of that, success is fractional. A very small proportion of the companies, the people that want to be successful in entrepreneurship succeed. I mean, that's a fact of life. So you've got to let 1,000 flowers bloom. And again, this can be very, very difficult. You've got to let the ideas go. You've got to let people go. You've got to let them try it. Not necessarily with your money, but with their time and their money and their people. Let them try it. And then you can weed and feed if you're on the investment side. But you've got to let a lot of people do it. It's no good trying to say, we're going to take these 5 or 6 people and put them in and it's going to all be successful. It tends not to work like that. My bias is towards trying to do things that are difficult, that do try to address big problems, real problems out in the market. About 2 years ago, myself and most of my investing friends, we got really bored with, oh geez, not another social network, not another app for something that we don't really care about. There's some huge number of apps. How many actually are successful? A tiny fraction. We don't need more of these things, or we don't appear to. And lots of them are produced by students and by young adults who have very little experience of the world outside their small area. And so my take on this is there is so much terrific technology out there. There are so many major problems that can be fixed both as a world basis, at an enterprise level basis. There are some really big things out there. Go and do that. And if you can, try to build within your area some area of expertise where the founders or that area can become the experts at doing something. So yes, here we've got some clusters. We've got some clusters here in obviously social, we've got gaming, we've got biotech, and we've got some networking. East Coast has networking. There's a town in Eastern Europe that is the hotbed of producing computer viruses. I was reading recently. More people are producing viruses in this one small town in Eastern Europe than anywhere else in the world. And they're sucking all the talent in there. Anybody who wants to do this seriously, you go there, because that's where all the hot talent is. And that's the other benefit to you, that you do bring in, you suck in talent when you become the experts. And it doesn't have to be high tech. The Italians have a reputation for being the people who produce the best mega yachts. That's a fact of life. They do it. They've cornered that market. The Swiss, of course, have watches and anything to do with timing. They've got a really big thing on that. So it doesn't have to be the same high tech as everyone else. That's my bias. Try and do that. Talent. Talent is a huge factor. Talent and market, we see having to come together, and in many cases, talent is sort of like a surfer sitting on a surfboard, waiting for that wave of something to come along. And the ideal intersection is when that wave is coming along, and you find a surfer who's really got a good understanding of that wave and understands the technology, the implications, where it's going to go, what it's going to do, and you get investors who've similarly researched it, and they all come together, and boy, you create something that's really fabulous. But talent is huge. Talent and market are the two key things. The technology's pretty much worked now. We don't care about those. It's the talent and the market. If you take people like, this is going back a few years, for those of you who don't know, this is a British group called Cream, which was the world-dominating pop group in the 70s. And these are people who came together, who had built up their experience by working with other groups at the time. So Ginger Baker was a jazz drummer, Jack Bruce was a classically trained bass player, Eric Clapton was a blues player. When they came together, they produced something that was bigger than the sum of the three of them. And they all grew, they all created something huge and tremendous that lasted 3 or 4 years and has not been seen since. Google. Larry and Sergey were pretty smart guys, but I've been to a party where pretty much everybody left the room when they came in, because here were these two, not another couple of Stanford PhDs, trying to dominate a market. Search. Geez, there were 15 other search firms. It was over. It was done. What the hell was this all about? And nobody wanted to go near them. That's not what people say now, but that's what was really happening back then. And it wasn't until Eric Schmidt came along and brought his talents, his views, his insights into it to develop a business model that they could take to market that it really grew and bloomed. And of course, you ask any team sports coach, it's all about the team. Team is the hugely important thing. The thing that, as an angel investor, we turn companies down most on is the team. We spend more time doing due diligence on the team than we do on the technology. Technologies usually work, but the team can have flaws that make it, you just know, this is not going to work. You haven't got the right talent there. So finding ways to attract talent into you is a key way of doing it. Silicon Valley we deform the time-space continuum here. So if you think of it like a sort of flat sheet of rubber, and you put a fairly heavy weight in the middle of it, talent rolls into Silicon Valley. More startups here are founded by first-generation immigrants than by locals. In fact, it's rare to come across a California local here. Talent pours in to Silicon Valley from all over the country, all over the world. So again, find ways to attract that best talent. Talent makes a huge difference. Leverage the alumni that you all have out there. There's very, very interesting to me that it took so long to make happen. I've got a couple of friends, husband and wife team, who are angel investors. They're both Stanford alums, and they did some research on, they wanted to find out what made Stanford such an interesting place. Why was it doing what it was doing? And so they looked at all the patents, and they got about 7,000 patents. Anybody care to take a guess? How many of those patents that Stanford University have made serious money for them? 7,000. How many have made serious money? So we got 10, we got 5, 2, yeah, it's actually 3. So patents don't count. The idea is that it doesn't count. 7,000, only 3. What they found, after doing several years of research, was that it's the people that Stanford churns out that really make the difference. About 7 to 10 years after they've left Stanford, they do the thing that we see happening a lot. They get frustrated with the companies they're in. They see an opportunity that the company they're in doesn't want to take advantage of. They're getting divorced, and they have to do something, so that this is a driving force to get them to start to become entrepreneurs. And they are unusually successful at it. And so they, on their own, began to say, okay, this is really interesting. Let's find these successful people. Now, of course, Stanford as a university keeps track of them and goes out and asks them for money all the time. But let's do something different. Let's see if they will be prepared to give back in a different way. Let's see if they'll be prepared to give back by becoming mentors to the new groups coming through. And perhaps because there's that emotional link to the college, will they perhaps be angel investors to them? And so they formed 2 years ago an organization that has now been given the stamp of approval by Stanford called Stanford Entrepreneurs and Angels. And it's becoming an extraordinarily successful virtual circle and feeds on itself. What surprised me is that it only happened 2 years ago, that insight took so long to happen. But this is something you can all do. You can encourage this to happen. Bring those alums back. Do all that. It makes a great deal of difference. And finally, above all, as you're doing today here with yourselves by what you're doing at this conference, inspire and celebrate all the people that you educate, that you can connect with, who want to become entrepreneurs, who aspire to become entrepreneurs, who make the jump to become entrepreneurs. Even if they don't make it, give them a gotcha. That's the way that you start to build that grassroots, hey, it's a good thing to go and become an entrepreneur. So thank you very much for your time. I hope you found this interesting, and I'm happy to take any questions if you have any for me. Oh, thank you. No questions? You're also still struggling? Oh, some questions over there, yes. I don't know if you have a microphone. Okay. Does entrepreneurship go against capitalism?
So, loving the question. A typical investor thinks nowadays in America, I think it's a very big weakness, short term, quarterly payments, annual maybe, they're red ink back.
Right.
But a lot of investors know what the failure rate was.
Yep. Yep.
So how do you fight that?
Okay.
How do you fight the lethargy of a very rich economy that only wants a certain return?
Okay, so how do you overcome the issues of investors not wanting to take risks, not wanting to take a long time to pay back? Well, if you're a professional venture investor, your time to exit now is averagely 10 years. So you know, as a professional VC, it's going to take you that time. However, as a consequence of that, far fewer VCs are investing at the A round, and certainly not at the seed round. They're investing much more at the B round, which is why there's this so-called A round crunch. Everybody's going later stage because they want to reduce that risk down, and they want to try and be more certain and reduce that time down. But the time coming down is still 7 to 10 years. If you ask the majority of VC firms, they will still say, we're looking for entrepreneurs to build great companies, and yes, we do need an exit, but we know it's 7 to 10 years out, and the exit will be almost certainly an acquisition by a larger company versus an IPO. Now, what has changed is, certainly in Silicon Valley, is the angel side. And that's changed. The old order used to be angels would come along, they'd put money in at the idea stage, VCs would come along and pick the best ones, squeeze the angels out, and they'd go and take it. And angels, we're getting a bit ticked off with this. And, but they were told to just shut up and keep going. But things changed in Silicon Valley with the success of companies like Google and Cisco and eBay and PayPal and so on. So what you have now for angels is a circumstance where, because they're buying 50 companies per week, in many cases they're buying those companies simply to acquire the talent, because talent is so short here, that you can put in 1 or 2 rounds of angel funding, and within a 12 to 24 month period, the company will be acquired. At Sandhill, we recently had a deal where we put some money in it at $800,000 valuation. Down the road, they're becoming very successful. VC firms did an investment at $8 million valuation, and many of the Sandhill Angel members who'd invested took the opportunity to sell their shares, and so they received a 10 times return on their investment in a 12-month period. That's a great thing. What we're starting to see is there's, angels are taking the place of the A round, but there is still a gap. But the professional VC firms still take the long view. 7 to 10 years, let's build a great company. So that is there. Angels, at least here, have maybe a different view on it. So, yes, sir.
Related to the short-term view of investors, what do you think the short-term view of entrepreneurs, where they're building to get acquired? I'm sorry, thank you. Yeah. Related to the short-term view of investors, yep. You said that a lot of them are getting acquired very quickly. What effect do you think that's good or bad for innovation? If Apple or Intel had been acquired 2 years after they started, they wouldn't be the companies they are today.
Sure.
So how is that sort of quick hit versus the long-term home run view affecting innovation?
What I see is something very different here than what I see over in Europe. So if you take the example of Europe, I'm a rarity there. I co-founded 8 companies. I think 6 of them were over there. And that's relatively rare. What happens over in Europe, you do a startup, you get successful, you get the exit, and you take your money and you go and sit on a beach in Spain. Done. You've made it. Here, what tends to happen is that first-time entrepreneurs get something going, they get some angel funding, they get it moving, they get acquired, they maybe get, let's say, company sells for $12 to $20 million. The 2 founders walk out of there with $3, $4, $5 million each. They don't go and lie on a beach somewhere. They then take that experience, take that money, and go and do the big thing they found they really want to go and do. And so the serial entrepreneur thing happens here. And so from my view, it's a good thing because it gives the opportunity for people to get the education experience of doing it hands-on, which until you've done it, your only experience prior to that is you've been a student or you've had a job. Neither of those gives you any insights into what it's like to be a startup founder. And until you've gone through it, you just really don't know. But the ones that do go through it and love it, they want to get back in there again. And they can't wait to get out of that 12 months lockup and get out of whoever's bought them and get in there and do the next thing. It's terrific. I think it's a good thing. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
I was just going to say, I'm in Springfield, Missouri, and we have our center helps run a fairly new, small angel network, and we funded 4 deals in 4 years. We're small and we're new. But honestly, if the entrepreneur says that their plan is to be acquired in a year, our angels are not interested in them.
Yep. I can see that in different places. So it works here. And from an angel's viewpoint here, it's a great exit. And you have to have make sure that what the entrepreneur wants to do lines up with what the investors want to do. If there's a mismatch, you've got to go and find different people. But here, that's a very frequent, very valid process. So it might not happen elsewhere. In fact, frequently can't happen elsewhere because you don't have the acquisitive companies there to make it happen. Okay, terrific. Thank you all very much for your time. I hope you find it helpful.
Thank you very much.
Not at all.
On behalf of the board for USASBE, I'd like to offer you a little token
Well, thank
of our
you.
appreciation.
Appreciate
Thank you
that.
so much. It was
No.
fabulous talk. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate
Great.
that.
Okay, we've got 15 minutes and then we start again. So I know there's coffee and some breakfast items here. Have some fun and we'll be starting again 15 minutes.